much to Sara. You are such an inspiration. Just the amount of, I don't know, just talking to you every time, even if it's just like a minute here and a minute there, it's so inspiring. And just like, you know, just your hiskashrus and doing this like totally just 100% for the cause. And like you said yesterday, I just want Mashiach to come. And I think that's really, that's it. That's what it's about. I think every one of us here are here just for that. That's all. We just want Mashiach to come. And the Rebbe told us that this is the way. And that's why we're here. And that's why we're doing this, because we're tired of this galus, and we're doing something about it. So thank you so much, Sara, and take it away. Really, really excited. There's something special about like opening a Sefer that I never opened before, and just like opening to the first page and, you know, starting to learn it, because, you know, if I don't know, everyone's different, but for me, I wouldn't just open it on my own. Like I need that social support of doing it together. So that's why it's great. Like the Rebbe said, when we're together, we just really inspire each other. And I see that we have over 10 people, and that makes me so happy. And we have 13, like the Yud Gimel Midas Harachmim. So this should just really bring brachas to everybody who's here and everyone who's not here, and everything that we need, only revealed good. And the main thing is, the full revealed good of Mashiach now. So take it away, Sara.
Okay. So first of all, if at all possible, it doesn't matter if you're in a tichel, if you could open your cameras, because we want this to be like a farangen, and it's very hard to talk to little black boxes. So we want this to be our weekly time where we can actually learn together, and it's so much easier if I can see your faces. One of what we will be learning, as you all seen, is the Sefer Inyano Shel Moshiach. Ideally, it's best if you have your own Sefer, because then you can follow along inside. You can take your little notes. You can put whatever you need in your own Sefer, so you can go back to your own Sefer time and again and use it, Mir Hashem, to teach other people in your own community. So ideally, again, I can't stress enough how important it is to have your own Sefer. However, if you don't, can people let me know, are there people here who do not have the Sefer? Please let me know, because if you don't, I do have the pages scanned and I can put it up. Again, I prefer not to have to scan it, because if I put that up, then I can't see your pictures. I only see a few people. I really would like to brain with you. And again, if you could open your cameras, that would be so much nicer. So by raise of hands, can people please show me if you have the Sefer? If you do have the Sefer, can you please like raise your hand? So just go to the chat box, and there you can raise your hand. Anybody have the Sefer? 50, raise your hand. You have it. You showed it to me, right?
Wait, I was talking and I forgot I'm on mute. Yeah, I think it's just us that have the Sefer, so we'll have to do screen sharing. Okay. And
so we'll have to do screen sharing. All right. So we'll do that. That's all right.
Let me just make sure you're host. Okay.
All right. Oh my dear.
I'm sorry, can you show us a bit of the Sefer again?
The Sefer is called Inyano Shel Moshiach. And it actually, this is already the 3rd edition. So, Inyano Shel Moshiach, and we are going to start. Okay, I've got it up now. Let me share my screen, and we'll begin. Here we go. Okay, so we will start actually with the introduction to the Sefer. And the reason I start with the introduction is because there is actually tremendous amount in the introduction that helps us actually understand what it is, how we have to learn about Mashiach. And actually, even just in the introduction, it already gives us some insight into some of the various opinions that are out there about Mashiach and about Yemais Mashiach. So we'll read and translate. Unless other people would like to read and translate, by all means, I can give over to anybody. We can do this together. I don't have to be the one to read, but so please, if you do
Yeah,
want
I
to
think go for it. If there's anyone that can volunteer, it's always nice when it's interactive. So if there's anyone that doesn't mind reading, I think that would be, and if you can follow along with the screen share and just take turns reading, I think it's always nice to just hear different people's voices. So just open your mic and take it away.
So, and I'll begin, but please, I welcome anybody else to come and join or take over for me, so I don't get a hoarse voice by the end of this hour. So let's start off with the Bali Hashmua. Bali Hashmua, of course, the people who are the ones who we are going to quote. So in a sense, this Sefer Inyano Moshiach, and I have to just give a little bit of background here, that it started over a year ago here in Melbourne. We were locked down from March last year, and we felt, as the president of the Sheikh Abad, I felt it was really, really important. Me and my co-president, Tamar Rosenfeld, Aleh Shalom, felt very strongly last year that we needed to do something for the women of our community. We were all locked down, and it was months and months and months. Tamar and I had already made hachlata already a few months before that we were going to learn the Sefer that had come out, and we were learning it together. And so when this lockdown happened, and I thought, what could I do that could be just a little thing, a little short idea to give our women each evening? And I started doing it based on the Sefer that I had already started. I went back to the beginning, and I did it in little 10-minute snippets from 9:45 to 9:55 at night. It was a Zoom, and it was like the last thing people learned, like you say, we're told that you should learn like Tanya right before you go to bed. Last thing on their minds, the feedback we got was like that when we were saying the last thing we learned, it was wonderful to be the last thing we learned before we went to bed. And that continued for over about a year and a half until I finished the Sefer. I had second edition. I then found out that the third edition came out. So I started it up again for another number of sessions till we finished again the third edition. So there's over 200, I believe over 250 of those little 10-minute snippets that have been recorded. And unfortunately, during that time, my co-president fell ill, and we were doing it for her refuah shlema. And then, unfortunately, it became something that we were doing Le'ili Nishmasa. So I'd like to dedicate then this year again, Le'ili Nishmas, all of our loved ones who we've lost during this year and a half of COVID, whether it was from COVID or from anything else. And we should be zeichev to a tchias hamesim and to see all of our loved ones immediately. So having said all of that, when Rivki asked to start this up again with the shluchos, to give you an opportunity to learn, so that, as the Rebbe always said, as shluchos we learn, we do things that we can then be the one to we have to be ready to be able to teach others as well. And originally I was asked to do the sichos of Nun Aleph and Nun Beis. And in my experience, I found that this Sefer helped me to put everything that are in the sichos of Nun Aleph and Nun Beis in context. And then it allows me to better understand and be able to explain those sichos. And therefore I felt that if we really want to be Tefech HaManas LaTfiach, to really understand the Rebbe's views on Geula Mashiach, and to be able to do what the Rebbe wanted, which is to be able to teach this to others and to really understand what it is that we're awaiting, then we really need to learn something that's going to put all of the Rebbe's Torah in one organized place. So in this Mava, in this introduction, we're going to see how the Rebbe takes the people who wrote the Sefer. And what we have to understand is I consider the Sefer like a thesis. In other words, it's written by, it was in Eretz Yisrael. It's written by Shalom Dov Ber Wolf. The editor of it is Menachem Mendel Halpern in Eretz Yisrael from his Achtos HaChasidim for Kabbalah's Pnei Mashiach. And I call it's like a thesis in the sense that they write everything, and everything is footnoted. So it's a collection, it's quoting from the Rambam and the Ramban and the Rebbe, and everything that they say, they explain very clearly, as we're going to see, where they got what they're writing, and it's footnoted, so you can always go back and look it up further. And whenever it's something that they come to a conclusion by looking at different sources, they will use that sort of terminology. So let's just get right into it. Let's begin. So the Sefer begins to really discussing how they are, how they come, what they're planning to do here. So we are really going to come now, and we're going to sit and we're going to learn all about Moshiach. So before we can start learning, we have to really understand what are the sources that we are going to use, the main sources that we are going to use. If we want to really understand, who do we have to go to look? Where do we have to look? By samcha levar es mashmalsim shel dvarim ulachriya b'mkayim shel safek u'machlekes asher la'ayram nelech u'mipiem nichya. So who are the people that we have to rely on, right? Who are the experts who are really going to be able to explain things to us and who are going to be able to resolve or reconcile any arguments that might come up, differences of opinion in terms of different areas about Moshiach? And so who are going to be those final decision makers for us, who we will then follow and who we will go according to? So we have many chachamim, right, over the course of many generations, who dealt with this concept of Bias Mashiach, who explained it, and who actually made Sfarim. So while there may be many Sfarim that have people who have written things about Mashiach, this Sefer that we're learning is focusing on the works of the Rambam, the Ramban, and the Rabbein, the Chabad Rabbein, and specifically our Rebbe. And we're going to soon see why these are the people who we are going to rely on mainly. So in this particular Sefer, we are going to treat the Rambam, the Ramban, and the Chabad Rabbein, and particularly our Rebbe, as the main sources for every explanation about Mashiach. So it's for that reason, because we are going to be focusing on what the Rambam, the Ramban, and the Rebbe says, it's important to preface it and first really spend a bit of time understanding who these people were, who the Rambam, Ramban, and the Chabad Rabbein, why they are particularly the ones we are relying upon. And we need to do that so to understand and really appreciate the weight of what they say versus anybody else, we have to really understand who they are. So specifically, the weight that their words carry, and more especially in this area when we learn about Mashiach. But it's not just for us to understand more about them so we can appreciate why we are relying on these people, but it's also more than that. Amru Chazal, what do Chazal teach us? And generally, when we say Chazal, we're referring to somewhere in the Gemara. So we're taught in the Gemara, in the Yerushalmi, you can see here, that anyone who says something in the name of the person who said it, we should imagine the person who we're quoting is standing right in front of us. Now, why is it like that? Why, when we learn something and we quote, should we imagine that that person is standing there? When we learn something from a person, we are connecting ourselves to the neshama of that person, of that author. So we can perhaps understand. So we perhaps understand, and this the Eshel helps us to also see the difference between a direct quote, like we see here, the Gemara, or when Rabbi Wolf is saying something from themselves, like what they're the people who are collected all of this and are writing what they say, that perhaps we can understand. And it's not just that we should imagine that the person, like imagine the Gashmistika vision of the person standing in front of us. Elegantly, he's spine beishiyusai, tchunaisav, myself, v'derech limudah shel bal hashmua. What we really need to think about when we learn something from a particular person, we need to really think about who that person is, his personality, his character traits, what he did, his method, his methodology in learning. Because by really understanding that, who they were and what they were all about, and the method that they learned, we can then really connect ourselves to that person. What is the purpose of doing that? Not just that our neshama is connecting, but when we really understand who it is that we're learning from, we can understand it better. So in general, I do a lot of teaching of Chumash and training teachers in Chumash and Navi and Tanakh, and whatever it is, I always say to them, context is so important. Especially, and this is exactly what we're talking about here. You're going to learn different Mefarshim in Chumash, Rashi, the Ramban, the Arachaim, the Kliyakar, to really truly understand what they're saying. It's very important to know who they were. When you know who they were, the time that they lived in, the challenges that they had, it helps you better understand what it is, why they are focusing on what they focus on in that particular Mefarish, and helps really get the context of what they are saying. And that's exactly what we're saying here. It's the same thing. So we're talking about Inyano Moshiach, to really connect, not only to connect to them in terms of seeing them, but to really understand what they're saying. We have to know more about them and why we are relying so heavily on their words in preference to anybody else. That's why it is now, we're talking about Inyano Moshiach, so the few lines, pages really, that we're going to now have discussing these people, who they were, and their Torah of the Rambam and the Ramban, Rabbi and our Rebbe. So to a certain extent, this is really fulfilling this idea that we should have the Bal Hashmua Omed Connected, that we will understand the people whom we are going to quote. And it's like they will be standing in front of us. And that is the appropriate introduction to be able to learn their Torah, is to really understand who they were. Okay. Any questions on that? Would someone like to volunteer to read the next part? Shel.
I would love if someone would read. Anyone who has it in front of them and is free to read in Hebrew. No volunteers?
All right. Then I will continue. So let's talk about the Torah of the Rebbe. I'll say to Hakrava Eleni, Masha be Iker Nagir Lanu, the Chaviv Lanu Hakdimai, Terasa Shal Rebbe Nesidarein. So starting from closest to us in time, and what is, of course, the dearest to us, is, of course, the Torah of our Rebbe. Now, what do we know? And we're going to see a lot more about this later in the Sefer. The Chlal, that in general, Nasi Hadar Harehu Ishpashtusa Tamasha Shevadar. You know that the Nasi is the spark of the Moshe Rabbeinu in our generation. Asher by Miskayim Divrei Chazal, Moshe Rabbeinu loy meis. So when Chazal say that Moshe Rabbeinu did not die, the original, of course, Moshe Rabbeinu, the physical flesh of Moshe Rabbeinu who took us out of Mitzrayim, is no longer with us. But the spark of Moshe Rabbeinu's neshama is in every Nasi of the generation. And that way, the Moshe Rabbeinu did not die. The Fisha Boy Mulubeshes, Nishmas Moshe, the Darka and Miskalis Tars Hashem, the Vnei Yisrael, Kafisha Hay Aide Moshe Rabbeinu B'Shaita. Because the Nasi Hadar is a person in whom the neshama of Moshe Rabbeinu is enclosed, and therefore through that person, the Torah of Hashem is revealed to Bnei Israel exactly like Moshe Rabbeinu revealed the Torah to Bnei Israel in his time. So the Nasi Hadar is the one who is revealing Torah to us. And just Bashgacha Pratis, the Kutei Sichas Parshas project of this week, in Parshas Shoftim, the first Sicha, the Rebbe discusses at length this difference between a Melech and a Nasi. And whereas generally the Melech is someone who has more of the physical leadership, who takes the political or taking them to war, taking care of everything that they need. And the Nasi was more of the spiritual leadership. And then the Rebbe says, but the Moshe Rabbeinu was both the Melech and the Nasi, and so too Melech HaMashiach will be both the Melech and the Nasi. Now, since we know that in every single generation and also every single day, Hashem is giving us the Torah anew. And that's why, because it's like Hashem is forever always giving us the Torah anew, we find that there are concepts in Torah and very deep in Inyano in Torah that are constantly being revealed to us, things that may not have been known before. So yeah, the Rebbe taught us things that were not known in previous generations. And therefore, Azai, Nasi Hadar, Ha'ayme Tachas Moshe Rabbeinu, Hu Naisin Hatar Shebedar. So the Nasi of each generation who stands in the place of Moshe Rabbeinu of that generation, he is the one who's giving the Torah to that generation. L'chein Avurenu, then we understand, of course, for us, Talmidei HaRebbe Nesidarenu, we are the students of our Rebbe. Hachidushim v'habiurim shalai v'taras taifsi makam b'roish v'chol sugi v'tara b'nasai. That means that any of the chidushim and any explanations in the Rebbe's Torah, they will take first place. They will be at the head of the list in terms of anything that we are going to deal with. We want to know, first and foremost, what does the Rebbe teach us about that? Advarim hanal, but these things that we've just said, this idea that it's the Nasi, it's the Moshe of the generation, who is the Naisin HaTorah of that generation, is something that is correct then for every single generation. So each generation will have its Moshe Rabbeinu, who is the giver of the Torah of that generation. In addition to that, but there's something quite unique about in this role as the Naisin HaTorah when we are talking about the Nisim, the Rabbein of Chabad Rabbein. How is that? Baal Shem Tov taught us. Or Bigamatria Raz. So Or, Aleph of Reish, is the same numerical value as Reish Zion, 207. Hayodea Saida Shel Davar, Musugo Lahayir Es Davar. And what's the hint of that? Baal Shem Tov taught us that someone who knows the secret of something is therefore able to enlighten that thing, right? To shed light on whatever that matter is. So if I really understand the essence of what something is and what lies behind it, the secret of that thing, I can shed light on that. So we understand that this is what is like in Torah itself. When a person knows the secret, or really the inner aspect, the inner idea behind every concept in Torah, so then all the details of that inyan are become very clear to that person, fitting in with this foundational aspect. So everything that we have, every mitzvah, every concept, there is a foundational inner dimension, what the real purpose or the main inner point of that is. And when we know what that main inner point is, the foundation of every concept, it helps us understand everything about that concept as well. And therefore, Inyano, when we talk about what we're talking about, Inyano Geula and Moshiach, Shayidei Tars HaChasidus, Hamagala Es HaSoid HaPnimi Shekol Inyan B'Torah, we know that, of course, that is what Chassidus is all about. Chassidus is here to reveal that inner secret of every Inyan B'Torah. But Pnimius, what is it really about? Not just B'chitzanius, what do we do in terms of halacha, but more B'Pnimius, what is really spiritually happening every time we do these things? What is the spiritual meaning behind all of the things that the Torah says, whether it's the story, the narratives in the Torah, or the mitzvahs that are there? Azai HaTorah nases mu'eres u'berua. Then the Torah becomes completely enlightened and clear because we really understand what's going on. So instead of being like David Melch says that we are like in darkness, like blind people, touching and hitting walls and trying to find our way around because we really can't see, so we're kind of guessing and using our hands to feel where we're going. Instead of that, Roim Torah Or. We see Torah as light. It's clear as day. Now, this idea that we really, in order to really understand it, we have to understand the pnimius of everything. This is particularly relevant when we're talking about the foundational aspects of Yiddishkeit. And of course, part of those foundational aspects, part of Yud Gimel Ikrim, the Chlalam Hamuna B'Bias Mashiach. Amongst the foundational aspects of Yiddishkeit is this belief in the coming of Mashiach. Because this, of course, expressions in Lashon Kodesh is always so beautiful, that without these particular explanations of Chassidus, we don't have our hands and feet in the base medrash. In other words, we have no place to start. We really don't have any foundation if we don't have Chassidus to really understand the concept of Bias Mashiach properly. Therefore, so therefore, if we're going to come now to be busy with this foundational concept and meaning of what Yemais Mashiach is, and the faith, the emunah that we need to have in this area, so the first person who knows these hidden areas, who's going to show us how to approach these inyanim, so here we're going to find these foundational concepts explained first and foremost in the works of our Rebbe. Is going to explain all of these concepts really to their full depth. So really get to the bottom of all of this. But Dafka al Yidei Halimud Ba'ifim said, it's particularly when we learn the Inyano Gol Mashiach through the lens of Chabad Chassidus, Nasim Gam Chelki Asukah Shebehem B'Bchinas Nigla B'Roim Me'irim. So when we understand it according to the Pnimius HaInyanim, as explained in Chassidus Chabad, we will then be able to also understand the nigla of these things much better. So the psukim that we find in Torah, in nigla, about Mashiach will become so much clearer when we really understand the deep of the pnimius hanyanim of what we're talking about. As we will see as we continue to learn this in depth. When we talk about the Nasi, our Rebbe in particular, Amr Chazal. So again, in the Gemara, we know that there is a particular saying of Chazal, Halacha karav b'Yisurim u'kashmul b'mominus. So Rav and Shmuel often disagree with different things. Two very, very great Amoraim, but at the end of the day, who do you rely on? And there is a saying that when we talk about things that are Isurim, things that are not allowed, the halacha goes like Rav. But when we talk about financial matters, then we go according to Shmuel. He's the expert in capital cases, and Rav is going to be the expert on the other thing, other Isurim that we have. Muvur al Kach, it's explained. That even though both Rav and Shmuel dealt with these types of Isurim, right? Whether it was Dini Isser, things that were forbidden to us, people can be chayav different punishments for, or Dini Mamunos, financial matters, financial things. After became hismacha rav ba'if miyuchad bedine Isser, v'lechein tamin halach k'maisa b'Yisrael. So Rav, what was it? He specialized in this area. And therefore, because he spent so much time learning this area of halacha, the halacha will always be like him in these topics. Now, Shmuel, he focused his time, he spent a lot of time specializing in Dinei Mamonos. And that's why when there is a discrepancy between Rav and Shmuel in these different areas, it will go according to Rav in Yisrael, and we're going to go according to Shmuel in Mamonos, because they became the experts in their fields. So with the weight of these words, right, with this concept that we find in the Gemara, let's bring this into what we're learning right now. Halacha that the halacha is going to be like our Rebbe when we talk about Inyano Moshiach. Why? Because this Inyano Moshiach, this was the Rebbe's chelek in Torah. In other words, this was an area of Torah that the Rebbe spent the time learning day and night. He worked on this always, and he went and delved into it very, very much, extraordinarily. And therefore, he specialized in this field. And as we know, the Rebbe said about himself, that from the day that he went to Cheder, and even before that, he was always trying to imagine in his head, what is the future Geula going to look like? From when he was a young child. So this was his passion. And as is very apparent from all of the Rebbe's sichos, throughout all the years, you could see over the course of the years, from the time the Rebbe became the Rebbe, right till Tafshin Beis, you can see when you look very carefully at through all of the sichos that as time went on, the Rebbe continued and stronger and with more depth to explain the concepts of what this idea, what Mashiach is going to be. And also, as becomes very clear when you look at the collection of the Sefer, of course, that we have now, where people collect the words of the Rebbe over all the time, and they collect it all into one place. So when you put everything that the Rebbe said about Mashiach and Geula in one place, you start seeing that progression, how the Rebbe was delving deeper and deeper into the concept of Mashiach and Geula over the years. And you could then see how the Rebbe's Torah was literally like a ladder, standing on the ground, but the head was hitting the heavens. How the Rebbe was continuously teaching us about Mashiach, one level above another, deeper and deeper and deeper. First, the simple meaning of what it is, then pneumius, then the inner meaning, and then pneumius lepneumius, even the inner meaning of the inner meanings. Especially, particularly, point out that when you look at the last sichos, so we're talking about the last sichos of the Nun Aleph Nun Beis, and specifically in that last year. And when we say that last year, mamish, what do we mean by the last year? You can see in the footnote here, number 12, it was Shnas HaTzadik L'Halad Rebbe. So the 90th year of the Rebbe, which is the year between Yud Aleph Nisan of Tafshin Nun Aleph and Yud Aleph Nisan of Tafshin Nun Beis. So in that year, what do we have? So in that last year that we heard, that we were Zeicha, to hear the words straight from the Rebbe's mouth, shebehem yored la'omek hadvarim atachlisam. There, the Rebbe delved into the essence, really, of what this Yemais Mashiach is all about. And even more than any of the other sikhs that were said earlier on. So in a sense, we could see how the Rebbe was schlepping us along and take us along on this journey with him, on this ladder, right? Starting from the very bottom, very simple, but getting deeper and deeper and deeper, as we are going to see throughout the Sefer, when we look and as they will do here, collect things that the Rebbe said earlier and things that the Rebbe said later years about some of the same concepts. So again, we come back. When we come back to wanting to learn about Mashiach, so for us, this is really the main source to learn and to delve into the Torah of Geula is, of course, from the Rebbe. So in every place that we know, even earlier on, and again in halacha, when you have a difference of opinion, so you go according to the last pasuk, and halacha is like that last pasuk because he becomes the mumcha, the expert who takes into consideration everything else that was said beforehand. So what are we saying again here? Yes, or beer, even more. When we say that not only the Rebbe specialized, that he spent a lot of time here, not only is he like the Paitik Achar in this field, but there's something more. When we say that this is the Rebbe's special portion in Torah, we don't only mean that this is an area that the Rebbe spent a lot of time learning and looking into, and because he specialized in learning about this field, that's why he became the expert. It's more than that. It's more than that. It says that every person has a chelik in Torah, that their neshama is drawn to that because it's connected to their neshama. So what do we mean? So, Climber, this is to say, she'etz lai by the Rebbe, ha'inyan shall be as a Mashiach, who kagdarasa ha'inyan hachi klali bihadas. So, for the Rebbe, the whole idea of Mashiach's coming was, as the Rebbe himself framed it, the central concept, the central inyan in Yiddishkeit. Hanakuda ha'ikaris b'chai kol echad echad Yisrael. It has to be the central point in our lives. Notice that this is 16 and 17. Where did the Rebbe say these things? So we see here, Shabbos Parshas Sara of Nun Beis, Shabbos Parshas Tolos of Nun Beis. That the concepts of Mashiach and Geula, that is the foundation, that is the main part of Yiddishkeit, and that has to be the central focus of every single Jew. That means that even for people on our level, Inyano ha'ikri u'mataras chayiv shalai atzmai. So it's very clear to people like us that we see this. We see that from us when we look at what the Rebbe said, that yes, for the Rebbe this was the main inyan, and this was the purpose of his life. And he took upon himself this responsibility to bring Mashiach. So, of course, if this is what the Rebbe saw as the main point of our entire lives, so he delved into it. This was his purpose. This was his mission. And he took responsibility for this to happen. So we can also understand then when the Rebbe was dealt with these inyanim of Inyan Go Mashiach, it was with a very serious, it was a very personal and very urgent and a very internal aspect. It was negate to his nefesh. So for him, because it was so main, it was very easy. He had to get down to really what it was all about. I'm not sure what that word is, but the halacha is like him, like the Rebbe, in terms of as the expert in this thing.
Sarah, I just wanted to say that I'm really enjoying this introduction because, like for us as Lubavitchers, it's so obvious. Like, of course, whatever the Rebbe says, that's what goes. But to have like the way of how to explain it to other people who are not Chabad or not from, and like, well, who says? Well, there's other opinions out there, or I heard this or that, and having the language and the halachic and just in general logical explanation of why the Rebbe's word is the final word is really helpful. And also just on a factual level, when I had like there's one woman from the Litvish community, she's like completely from but very Litvish, and she was coming to the Mashiach classes, a lot of them, and what she kept saying is like, wow, there's nowhere else to learn this topic. Like there is no, like this is the only place. I don't know where else I can get classes on this topic. This, like, she was so fascinated. And now like recently the Ramalcha Sichas, she was saying like there is nowhere else to learn this. So it's definitely like, no one can argue. Like the Rebbe is the most knowledgeable, and yeah, and it's good to have the way to explain it. So thank you.
Everybody gets that. Like if you talk to people and say, if you had a very serious problem with your eye, you're not going to go to your GP. You're going to be sent to an eye specialist, right? And if you have a very serious stomach problem, you're going to be sent to the gastroenterologist or the heart specialist, right? So there are specialties in different areas because they spend so much more time learning that particular area. So of course, you're right. This is such a logical thing to be able to say. Why we take it from the Rebbe? Because the Rebbe, his whole life, this is what the Rebbe lived and breathed throughout his life. We're going to see it goes even more. When we learn the Rebbe's Torah, we find that it's Megillas. There's like so much. It's scrolls and scrolls and scrolls, right? We look at the farm, take a look at our bookshelves. We have, a number of shelves with Sefer Sfadius, and then we have another number of shelves with the Likutei Sichos, and then a number of shelves with the Sefer Sichos. It goes on and on and on. The Rayanas HaGeula Psurim al Pnei Tal or Lamates 39 Chelkei Likutei Sichos. So we have, when the Rebbe talked about Geula Mashiach, because the Rebbe always talked about Geula Mashiach, if we want to know what the Rebbe's view is, it's spread everywhere. It's all over the place. It's in the 39 Halakim of Likutei Sichos. Sefer Sichos. In addition to Likutei Sichos, we know we have the Sefer Sichos, which was also, these are the Sfarim that are edited by the Rebbe, so no one can say these are things that people made up. Likutei Sichos and Sefer Sichos are the things that the Rebbe himself checked and approved to be printed. We also have Sefer HaMaimarim, Igros HaKadosh V'Ayit, V'Laibo Keshita Stura. So the Inyano Geula Mashiach, it's not like the Rebbe wrote a Sefer of Inyano Geula Mashiach. The Rebbe lived and breathed this all the time, and it's spread out throughout the Rebbe's letters and Maimarim and Sichos throughout the entire years of the Rebbe's leadership. Lefichach, gam la'achar shenasta b'kama sfarim avodas likut shel hasichos hayisodiyos b'Inyano Geula. So after we find that there are a number of sfarim that have come out that are trying to collect the different sichos, the main sichos of the Rebbe on Inyano Geula, adayin kashel tamli laharkiv mehakol yachad tmuna shlema ubrur shel Torah Geula shel Rebbe. That people still find it's very difficult if we're just going to use, if we use all of the Rebbe's Sfarim, because the Inyano Geula Mashiach are all over the place. Then it's very difficult for a person to be able to collect all of that and to build up this correct, bigger picture of what the Rebbe said about Geula. Especially as we said before, the Rebbe's Torah is literally in layers upon layer, deeper and deeper and deeper. So it's very hard if you're just going to learn the sichos to really get that full picture. Which is what makes it even harder to really collect everything into one big picture. And that is the purpose of this Sefer and why I felt it was so important to learn this Sefer together. So the purpose of this Sefer was to be able to take the Megillus, in other words, all the things the Rebbe said that are spread out throughout all of the Rebbe's Torah, and to put it together in one place. So to put everything in context, in its right place, right, with the right context. So by putting it all together and categorizing it, right, seeing it as this is about Mashiach, and this is about Biach Mashiach, and this is about the mitzvahs of Mashiach, and by seeing it in those very particular ways, then we are able to see how everything the Rebbe said is, it's one methodology, it's one shita, it's really all comes together, it's all connected.
Thank you so much, Sara. I see we have one volunteer who's ready to read a little bit. Mushki Raskin volunteer, thank you so much.
I mean, I think Sarah's doing a better job than I could do, but if you want, like, I'm happy.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, it's just because it's nice to hear, just to hear more of us. So take it away a little. Like just...
Sure. So Sarah, I'm gonna try, and you'll fill me in where I'm missing. So miteva.
Yeah.
Okay. מטבע הדברים, שכאשר מלקטים את דברי הרב למקום אחד, so I guess naturally when we gather all the Rebbe's things into one place, ומחברים אותם לתמונה שלמה, I'm not sure how we translate tmuna, we combine them together into like one cohesive, tmuna, lovely picture, yeah. מסבסטפס בהבנת הדברים, גם מעבר למה שביאר הרבה עצמו במפורש. So, sorry, I'm gonna, you know what, I took this on so I could actually use my brain a little bit, and I can't translate that. So how does that help our understanding? Maybe you can fill that in. I'll continue reading after that.
Yeah, so when we put everything together in one place and we see the bigger picture, it adds to our understanding even more than the Rebbe, what the Rebbe himself explicitly said.
Okay, all right.
So in other words, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2 anymore. 1 + 1 becomes 3. Okay, so in other words, because when you put things together in the right context, you see the bigger picture, then you can see things that maybe were not actually said, but because you see now the whole picture, you understand things that did not have to explicitly be said once you see the full picture.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So there's more of a depth of understanding.
That's
so bevchinas lav beferish esmar ella miklala isamar. It's probably Aramaic.
Yeah.
Don't understand
in other
that.
words, lav, what is not explained explicitly, you learn, like you hear it, so what from the cloud. So in other words, this idea that what's implied, right? So you don't learn from what's written explicitly, you can deduct or deduce from the general cloud when you see the full picture.
So then it clarifies certain, like becomes clear, certain things are understood and explained that the Rebbe didn't even address them, but just you understand the Rebbe's gang, I guess, and then you can get a much better, you get a picture about certain things that the Rebbe seemed to have not addressed. Yeah?
Yeah.
Ach efshar levaram al pi uvehemshach ledvarav behaksharim acherim. So you can understand, we make those connections of how the Rebbe would have looked at that, would have spoken about that. V'mokaimes shenera shemadur ben yanim mashma'utiyim loy nimnenu melahaisif biurim ke'elu. Toich hishtadlos l'tzayin lahavdil ben divrei harav b'divrei Talmud. So I think I understood what it's saying, that you can, when something will come up and you're not sure, like it's not clear where it came from, you'll be able to discern what the Rebbe said and what the Rebbe didn't say. Is that what it means?
Yeah, they're saying that really in those places when we can deduce something from what the Rebbe said, but the Rebbe didn't explicitly say it, they will make it very clear in the Sefer, which is what I love about it, right? To differentiate between the things that are the words of the Rebbe himself and what are the things that they are deducing from it and making the klal and to trying to understand it based on what the Rebbe said, right? Extending it to what was not said, but what can be understood. And then they go on to explain how they're going to do that.
Okay, I think that I did. Happy for you to take over.
Come on, Rifki, you can do it. Go ahead.
What do you say?
You can do it.
Me? I'll just take also one little paragraph. Thanks,
Okay.
Mushki. I just feel like it's really good to take a turn, even if you don't have such a good Hebrew or you're not sure if you're going to translate it right. Like my Hebrew is also sichas are much easier to understand than this Sefer, but just go for it. It just helps to the brain to work, like you said, Mushki. So ubechal haklal hu shall kol davar divrei harav mitzuyan mikare. So in general, there's a rule in the Sefer that anytime we quote the Rebbe, it's going to say the source. So if there is no source, that means that this is the author, the chassid, meaning student, his understanding of it.
Right. So so that means we're going to see footnotes everywhere, right? So whenever it's something that the Rebbe said, we're going to see a footnote of where that came from. And if something is said and there's no footnote, that means Rabbi Wolf, from Shalom Ber Wolf, and his editors, that is what they understood from the context.
In addition, every time it's a quote from the Rebbe, it just says it that this is how it is, right? Because if the Rebbe said it, then we have no doubts. Whereas when it's the author writing, the chassid writing, so it will say, like we could say, it will have some kind of language that shows us that this is a possible way to understand it, right? אך כמובן שבסגנון עבודה כזה ובהיקף כזה ישנה מקום שקשה לשים תחומים בין דברי הרב ודברי התלמוד והקורא הנבון יעון במראה מקום סביבה. But nevertheless, it could be that sometimes it's hard to understand what exactly is the words of the Rebbe and what exactly is the understanding of it by the Rebbe Wolf, right? But if you will kind of go into it and look at the footnotes, I guess, and pay attention, you'll be able to figure it out.
That's right, because sometimes when you explain something, it's hard to differentiate and to separate what the Rebbe said from what they're explaining. Okay, that's great. Can you continue? Let's aim to finish up to Tarasa Shel Rambam. So this is what we'll finish off with tonight.
Okay, and I would love to hear just whoever is able to read, and the room is not too noisy, so just take it away. It doesn't matter what our level of Hebrew is; it's not important. Okay. Klal gadol b'Torah shel Rebbe she'Torah hi nitzches v'chol inyan b'Torah yesh bei mashmas v'Rab l'chol hazmanim l'chol hamatzavim. So there's a big rule in the Torah of the Rebbe that the Torah is eternal, and so every idea in Torah has a meaning and a lesson for all times and all situations. So if the Rebbe said something in one place, that means it's always true, and that's why I guess it could be applied in more situations. The kachgam b'nagei l'limud haTorah b'inyanim Mashiach hagula. Harabi Mara ketza divrei haTorah adis b'yas Mashiach ba'asid yesh lem mashmas aktualis b'hayva hanechachi. So the same thing is true in connection with learning the Inyano Mashiach, the Torah in Inyano Mashiach hagula. That the Rebbe shows us how the words of the Torah about Mashiach, the coming of Mashiach in the future, have an actual meaning right now in the present. Especially in the recent times, when all of the ideas of Geula already started. V'yeshna, here's a quote. Kvar, here, like I see, it's in the direct quotes that shows that there's a footnote that's going to say, Shaftim, that's actually this week's Parsha. And the other one is from Vayerav Yeshna Kvar his scholars the Mashiach. So because we already have the revelation of Mashiach, like the Rebbe said in Parshas Vayera, Tafshin and Beis, so the Rebbe told us that we're already in the beginning of the process of Geula. No, sorry. And therefore, what we're learning now is not just to learn something, about the future, but it has to be practical right now. Meaning, whatever we're learning, it's not like, okay, we're learning this just as a school to bring Mashiach, like we said in the beginning, but actually, we should be able to practically take something for it right now because we're already in the time of Geula. That means that we have to learn lessons in our Avaida now, even before we have the Geula. So everything's going to be practical right away.
Exactly.
That's something we learned from the Rebbe, right?
That's exactly right.
So yeah, that's nice, right? We're not learning like something theoretical. And in accordance with this Sefer is divided into three general sections. Aleph, Inyano shel Mashiach, Sikum Abir, Inyano shel Mashiach, Piniglo Pnimis, Darga Lamala Midarga. So first of all, we're going to explain what's the concept of Mashiach. And we're going to summarize and explain the idea of Mashiach according to Nigla and Pnimius, like one level above the next. Base, the second section is Eskalas Mashiach. Sikum Abir Divrei Rebbe. So the the second section is going to be the revelation of Mashiach. It's a summary and explanation of the words of the Rebbe about the way, the order that Mashiach will be revealed, and the order of the coming of Mashiach, with a special emphasis on what it means for us right now. Okay, again, not theoretical. And Gimel, Nitzas Mashiach, Sikum ubir divrei harabba idis avedisenu shel Yehudi bezman hazeh, b'kasher and bias Mashiach, b'kayach hanitzas Mashiach shebekarbenu. So the third one sounds like we're getting more personal to our own avodah of the spark of Mashiach. So we're going to summarize and explain the Rebbe's words about the avodah of every single yid right now in this time. I guess it means in the final moments of Galus, in connection with the coming of Mashiach, because we each have with the power of the spark of Mashiach, which is inside every single yid.
I just have to
Sarah,
point
you
out,
can add or
we're going to see these were the three main areas of the Sefer. In the third edition that came out, they added a fourth section, and the fourth section that was added after these was a section called Terasa Shel Mashiach, where they gave a number of examples through all the parshas of the Torah and the Haftarahs and Yom Tovim to give us a little taste of how the Rebbe comes back to showing us that really Geula and Mashiach is the central point in everything in Torah. And all of the things that we learn throughout, like Chumash, when you learn all the different parshas, the Rebbe shows us how really it's hinting to the final Geula. So that is the third edition that actually has that fourth chilek. And with that, we conclude our very first class. As you can see on the screen, in our next session next week, we will look at Teresa Shel HaRambam. And again, the idea here is we're going to really try to understand why. We know now why the Rebbe, as Hasidim, of course, we rely on the Rebbe, but now we understand also from an intellectual perspective why the Rebbe is the expert of this. And we're now going to, next week, we'll look at the Rambam and understand why the Rambam is the expert in this area as well.
Thank you so much first of all, of course, to Sara, and also to every single one of you. Like, we have right now, 11 people. We had 16, I think. But the fact that we have, each person is, you're making a big difference, because we really get the power and the inspiration from being together, even if you didn't speak up, but just you being here gives kind of, support to everyone else who's here. So thank you so much for being live, and hope to see you next week. And we should be already in Yerushalayim.
Can I ask something? Can I ask a quick question?
Of course.
Sir, can you just like sum up, is it basically this is a Sefer that they took everything, they compiled it, and they're giving, and they're putting some commentary as well. Is that the idea?
Yeah, so that's what I say. That's what a thesis is. A thesis is when you take something, you really look into one Inyan and you gather all the things that are said. But of course, here they took all the things that the Rebbe said and put it and organized it into one place and categorized it based on these areas, like we said, in terms of the concept of Mashiach, the revelation of Mashiach, and this idea of Nitzvah Mashiach, the fact that we, each one of us, has a spark of Mashiach within us, and therefore, what is it that we have to do? Now, of course, the Rebbe, as we're going to see, the Rebbe's Torah is very much based around the Rambam, and at times the Ramban. So what we're going to see next is why is it that the Rebbe, who we just said before is our first and foremost go-to source, why is it that when we talk about Mashiach and Geula, the Rebbe is very often quoting the Rambam? Why is it the Rambam that is the expert that the Rebbe turns to? And we're going to see that the Ramban is also an expert in this area. And we're going to come to that question, what's the difference between the Rambam and the Ramban when they disagree? And who does the Rebbe then go according to, the Rambam or the Ramban? So we always think the Rebbe and the Rambam, the Rebbe always goes according to the Rambam. Actually, no, not always. And that's what we're going to see, Mirta Shem, in our next few weeks, when we look next week at the Rambam, and then after that at the Ramban. Then that will become much clearer. But really, that's what this Sefer is about. It's saying, okay, if we don't have, the Rebbe wants us to learn Inyano Geula Mashiach. We don't have the time to learn all of the Rebbe's Torah, all the Kudas Sichos, and all of Sefer Sichos. Mr. Hashem, in 7 years, we'll have learned all the Sichos, but not yet. It's going to take a lot more time. It'll take a lot less time. So they did all the hard work for us and gathered all of the things that the Rebbe explained about Mashiach and Geula into this one place to make it much easier to fulfill the Rebbe's directive in our final mitzvah, which is the mitzvah of Mashiach. And first and foremost, as we're going to see many times in the Sefer, where the Rebbe said that the quickest and easiest way to bring Mashiach is to learn Inyano Geula and Mashiach. May the schools of our learning in a minyan, well, not really a minyan because we're women, we don't need minyan, but in a group of 10, Shechina Shura says when 10 Yidden come together, there's a special element of Siyata Deshmai that we get, and that we are in the schools of what we're doing. May that taka bring Mashiach.
Amen, amen. And Mushki, I just wanted to say out for 5 seconds, I feel like this is so important as shluchos for the Eifan and Miskavel, because if we just take one sicha without any context, we can't. You have to know the big picture in general, like for teaching. You have to know the big picture and in a way that could be understood by others. I think this is really helpful this is going to be really helpful for teaching, hopefully, for all of us, and we shouldn't even need it. We should have, just the chlata itself should be enough to bring the scholars right now. Thank you, everyone. Amen.